Charles, I'm very, very happy that I get to talk to you in front of all these people here. I just saw another interview of yours lately where you talked about playing with Charles Mingus made you a better person and a stronger person.
Stronger. I don't know if better, but stronger for sure.
Tell me about it.
Mingus was a very talented musician, of course, and a great bass player, great composer. But he was a complicated personality. He was multi-dimensional, I will say, and he had a lot of moving parts. He could be very confrontational, volatile, but very tender and loving also. So, and this kind of complicated personality quite often is those combinations make great artists, actually. People who are feeling, they are emotional and intellectual. And there's a sensitivity that usually they have. And all that mixed up ends up being probably the DNA of what great artists usually are. They are complicated people, you know, quite often. And Mingus was definitely that. And he was a great musician. So when I first joined Mingus's band, I was about 20 years old. And he was in his early 40s, and he was huge. He was big. He weighed like 300 pounds. And he was very strong, and he had a reputation for being confrontational. And so I was like this. I was very nervous. But after playing with him for many years, I saw all sides of him. I saw the toughness, but I also saw the heart also. So I became comfortable with him as I got older. And as I understood more about life, people, I got more comfortable with Mingus, and I could appreciate him more.
What do you think he expected of you?
He?
Charles Mingus. What did he expect
he expected for you to give 110% of yourself. He wanted you to be an individual and to express your own personality. But he was very insistent that you do it with gusto, you know, and that you played from your heart.
How did he verbalize that? Like actual suggestions on how to play, how to approach the music?
Well, he had a very interesting concept about that. I was talking to Denis about that. So Mingus the way he thought that you were supposed to behave musically was this kind of a mixed kind of thing, because he, if we were too pristine or too clean or too processed, he didn't like that. But to be disorganized, too much so, he did not like that either. So really, he used to use a term that's kind of a dichotomy. He would say he liked organized chaos, which can be a contradiction in terms, maybe. But that's what he liked, organized chaos. So he sit on this aesthetic fence between those two ways of thinking. And very interesting. Now, when I was younger and just started working with him, I did not understand the contradiction. But as I got older, I understood what he meant. And basically, what he meant was, also, I think it might have been Schoenberg that said pretty much, I think it was Schoenberg, that said pretty much the same thing that Mingus is saying, that written music should sound improvised, and improvised music should sound written. So there it is.
But how do you do that?
How do you do it? I think you do it by the awareness, consciously and subconsciously, that the main motivation for music and art is the power of the emotions, the human condition being expressed. And the emotionality of a human being is foremost more important than anything else. And craft, physical craft, takes the second seat. But the emotions and being able to express them from here as a human being is very important. And you're supposed to have the craft and the physical artistry to bring that about. So it's a perfect balance between left brain and right brain, between intellect and heart. So when you have inspiration and technique holding hands, you have great art.
That's great. Thank you for that. Yeah. How did you guys work on the music? How did you bring in charts, or did he teach you the music?
He had charts. He did have charts, which were very hard and difficult.
Why?
As you heard, Denis, some of that's some real tricky music. So he did have charts, and he had things written out. But sometimes he would show us the parts with him playing the piano, and we would have to listen, and we'd have to get it. He would play something on the piano, and play that. Really? Okay. So you try, and pretty soon your ears got better, and you would do it. But then after he had the parts worked out here, and he had shown us the parts for alto, trombone, tenor, whatever, then he would write it out after he has heard it. So sometimes he would do it that way, and sometimes he would already have the charts, because it would be music he wrote years ago. So both.
Is there a special go-to memory that you always go back to from the rehearsal process of certain songs?
No, when I was much younger, I was very, very good at remembering and doing that stuff pretty good. But now, a lot of that I don't remember anymore. But it's like riding a bicycle, You never really forget. But, so if I go back and kind of refresh my memory, I'm okay. But that's been so long ago that it all becomes one big moment.
Hey there. Thanks for checking out the podcast. If you enjoy these conversations, please consider joining me on patreon.com/PabloHeld For more educational videos, lead sheets, early access to episodes, online hangouts, music recommendations, Bandcamp discount, and more behind-the-scenes stuff from the podcast. The generous support of my patrons helps me to pay for the running costs of this podcast, and it helps me to keep it going into the future. All right, let's get back to the episode.
So today I was listening to a recording of you playing with Charles Mingus, playing the song MDM, Monk, Duke, and me.
Mingus.
Oh, Mingus.
Yeah, Mingus, of course.
And you were playing a blues, and I mean, it's a blues, and you were playing first, and then Eric Dolphy was playing.
Yeah.
I'm curious because both you and Eric were so influenced by Charlie Parker, but both of you guys took it in different directions.
Yeah.
So I want to get into the topic of dealing with influences.
Yeah. Well, Charlie Parker was the influence for everybody. When he first emerged in the early 40s, he just influenced everybody. So basically, modern music since Charlie Parker has, he is kind of the beginning of all of that in a way. And so it's hard to escape the influence of Charlie Parker because people are playing some aspect of Charlie Parker, even if they don't know they are, because they learned how to play from someone else who did. So Charlie Parker's like Bach. There are certain people that come, that's only a few hundred years that they come, and they come so complete as an artist that they are very influential. And Charlie Parker's that. So basically, any development in jazz that has happened in the last 50, 60 years has come by way of Charlie Parker because his influence was so strong. And so what people have done is that they've taken his way of doing and thinking rhythmically, and that they have found their own way, Just like with Bach, people can write contrapuntally their own notes and their own feelings and soul. But some kind of way, there's a little bit of Bach in that, and you cannot escape it because it is, and because it's good. And that's the way Bird was. So you got many people who have come and innovated certain things, but for sure, the common denominator, some kind of way, is Charlie Parker.
Yeah. I'm curious, how did you find your way?
Well, when I first heard Charlie Parker, I was about, 14 years old. And I knew nothing about harmony. I knew nothing about chord changes. I didn't know anything about that. I did know my scales. I knew all the major scales, all the minor scales. I knew that, but I didn't know anything about the cycle of fifths and root movement, and I didn't know anything about that. I had no idea. And I had heard other players before, great players, jazz players. And then a young guy, little my age, told me about Charlie Parker. And so one day I'm in this candy store. And in those days we had jute boxes, and you put your coins in the jute box. And I saw Charlie Parker, and I thought, oh, here's this Charlie Parker guy that my friend was telling me about. And so I put the money in, and when I heard that, immediately it resonated. Because it was like, who is he? And that was it. And as I think about it now, the thing that that really got my attention was his linear sense of logic. And I had never heard that before. And what I mean by that is it's this linear sense of melodic logic, even though he's playing a lot of notes, but they all are making sense, and they are connecting up with another musical sentence that's long and eloquent, and it's making perfect sense. So it's not just random or a lot of notes, but there's a linear logic to them melodically. And I could hear that as a kid. I would never have used a term like linear logic because I didn't know what that meant. But I did know what logic meant. And when I heard that, that's the thing that got my attention because I hadn't heard that from other players. I had heard virtuosity. I had heard people that played instruments really well, that did play a lot of notes, but I didn't hear that rhythmic, logical configurations or the melodic logic that was involved. And that got me, and it got everybody that heard Charlie Parker in those days. Everybody thought the same thing I did. When they heard him on the radio, everybody said, "Who is that? What's that man's name? Who's he playing with?" So he had the same effect on everybody. And basically, that's why Charlie Parker is still great, because he had the perfect combination of head and heart and inspiration and technique and logic. He had all that. And at a very, very young age, which is very rare. You know.
Let's talk about, now we talked about what you thought Charles Mingus was expecting of you. What do you expect from musicians? Because now you're going to play with musicians from the local scene here. What do you expect from fellow musicians when you go on stage with them?
Well, I'm not like Charlie Mingus. So basically, but I am like, here's for me, all I would want from other musicians is for them to be empathetic and to be open and to mean what they say, to really mean it. And that doesn't mean being loud. It just means that they emotionally believe in what they're doing for the moment, every moment. And for me, that's what I want to do. And it's not that easy because you can't have distractions. You must be. It's a certain kind of concentration that you. It's kind of like these alpha waves, where you get in the zone here, and blot out everything else, and just try to get in the receptive mental mood to receive, because great playing is not an act of doing, it's an act of non-doing.
Explain that, please.
Say that again.
Please explain. Please explain of not doing.
No,
How do you
not
mean
doing
it?
and non-doing. Here we go again. Well, there's the dichotomy. So, oh boy, see, sometimes words are in the three-dimensional realm, and sometimes words are try to be used to describe something that's not in time and space and the three-dimensional reality that we know about. Because sometimes what we try to describe has nothing to do with physicality. and carbon-based reality. It's in another realm that has nothing to do with any of that. But our language is based on that. So we trying to describe that is, it's kind of like what I said earlier. It's like, it's the perfect combination of intellect and heart. There's a certain amount of analytical technique that you must have and be aware of. But then the part of yourself that uses the data that's in here, to way to get that out has nothing to do with the analytical process. It's got something to do with letting it happen. And that's what I mean by non-doing. It's a certain mental attitude that you have in order to get the best out of you. And it comes from a very relaxed state of mind that's not based on trying to prove anything. It can't be saddled with narcissism, because music is about, it's a humble thing. It's not an act of war and aggression. It's really a receptive attitude mentally that you must have that does the best job of using the information that you got analytically.